All right. We have like one more minute. There's still a couple people hopping in. For those of you guys that are just getting here, if you want to drop your name and where you're representing into the chat, that'd be awesome. Thank you guys for who have already done that. It's cool to see a lot of familiar faces. Right. I think we're good to get started. If anybody else hops in, we'll get them caught up. No big deal. Thank you all for being here on time. It's our first webinar of 2026, so we're really excited to see everybody. Thank you guys for coming out. Um, Today, we're going to be looking at our upcoming webinar dates, just so you guys can get those on your calendar for 2026. Um, oh, sorry, one second. And then we're going to talk about some commonly asked questions and then just some of our updates on our supports for LEAs and schools. And then we're going to also go into our attendance campaign updates, kind of coming up on our second half of the year for that. And then diving into some legislation, looking at how our attendance bills become laws and other things around legislation with the season like a week away. And then some attendance policy ideas, and then attendance data and best practices and questions to kind of wrap things up. So to finish out 2026, we'll have two more webinars. March 10th, same time, 10:30 a.m., and then May 5th, also at 10:30 a.m. And then we will be calendaring out for the upcoming school year. But to finish out this school year, these are our final dates. All right, hopping into some commonly asked questions, I am going to hand this back over to Megan.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Megan Menlove. I'm one of the attendance specialists here at USBE. I don't think Garrett introduced himself, but he's also one of the attendance specialists here at USBE. We're happy to see so many of you this morning. Hopefully, some of the information we share with you today can be helpful to your learning and to what you're working on currently or hoping to work on in the future with attendance in your LEA or in your school. In our webinars, we always try to go over some of the commonly asked questions that we get quite often. And so one of those we wanted to talk about today was, what do you do when parents refuse to engage? I'm sure that probably doesn't happen at any of your schools or any of your LEAs. I mean, it never happened to me when I worked in the schools, but just kidding. Happened all the time, right? So people always ask, what do we do with those parents who are refusing to engage with the school when it comes to attendance issues with their children? So the first question, we would always ask you is, what does your attendance policy state? So making sure that it's very clear in your attendance policy, what kind of engagement you expect from your parents, so that they're clear when the school year starts, and anytime you're contacting them that it is in your policy that parents do need to engage. Sometimes you'll be like, yep, okay, we already have that. So now, and yes, Eric, we will share this presentation. It will be posted on our website in the next couple of days, but we can also send it out if you want that as well. You're welcome to ask us for that. But so first of all, asking yourself, okay, we have it in our attendance policy, but then we still have parents who are refusing to engage, or you might be wondering what should be included in our attendance policy when it comes to parent engagement. Well, there are multiple laws that are very clear that parents do have the expectation to engage with the school to resolve attendance and truancy issues. So these two, if you're not familiar, You've heard this probably every webinar. I feel like we reference back to this code, this statute 53G6202. So if you're not familiar with that, I would definitely say it's worth spending some time here. I'm going to just pull it up. This statute has the definitions as well in it. We talked about that at our last webinar. But this 202 is the compulsory ed, and then 203 is the truancy. So 202 addresses your elementary students, and then 203 addresses your secondary students. So there is a lot in those two codes that talk about, what does a parent, what is the expectation of the parent? And then it talks about, what do you do with the parent, like when you send your letter of compulsory education or when you send your notice of truancy. So it's definitely clear, and you can definitely say Utah code or Utah policy or even board policy, state board policy also is in there where it requires parents to engage. So you can use that, use this link, use these codes when you're communicating with parents stating like, yes, it is law that you have to engage with the school. You do have to work with us. We are a partnership. Obviously, hopefully you have parents that are willing, but if they are not, then it's good to remind them that if they don't, then this is the next step process. There are also multiple resources to try to engage your parents beforehand or to also like show that partnership. If you're not familiar with our attendance campaign, hopefully today you'll get a little bit more of that. But one of the resources that we have with our attendance campaign is this awesome parent handout. I'm going to drop it in the chat. But this is just it says what families can do to support good attendance. And that's just a handout that you can either print and fold up. It's a tri-fold that you can give to parents or have available in your school or in your district. Or it's something you could just send out to parents too, like, what can you do as a family to support good attendance, to support kids being at school? There's also resources through Attendance Works that also help with parent engagement. There's a lot of handouts for families. And again, these slides will be shared out so you can get all these links, but I'll drop this one in the chat as well. So just another quick commonly asked question we get a lot is just about how do we engage with our parents? So just go to the next slide. I think it's back to you, Garrett.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. And thanks for the introduction too. I'm going to hop into what we at USB offer to LEAs and schools. It's really cool. I see a lot of you guys that are actually part of our cohort, and we've just begun sending out some invitations for our upcoming school year, but we do offer our engagement and attendance cohorts. This is where we engage with LEAs and schools in a year-long learning opportunity. We engage in focused sustainable attendance systems implementation, and then the focus of each cohort changes each year depending on individual needs. But a lot of the topics that we try to go over are attendance policies, updating, posting, sharing, revising, attendance systems, attendance teams, looking at attendance messaging strategies for all stakeholders, developing attendance interventions, which kind of leads into MTSS structures and attendance incentives, and then how you can utilize attendance data. There's quite a few other topics, but this is kind of that initial phase of diving in and developing those attendance systems for sustainability. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to Megan or myself. Our contact information will be on our last slide. And if you've gotten an email recently about joining, we look at our previous year's chronic absenteeism percentages. And so that would probably be why you've been reached out to. And we would love for you guys to take part in it. LEAs, schools, or charters, depending on whatever level you're looking at, we try to modify it for you as well.
Thank you so much.
Another one that we have that we offer is Check and Connect. Some of you might be familiar with Check and Connect if you have youth and care students, but we also have Check and Connect for prevention, which has actually grown, and we are about dead even with the amount of students that are being served for prevention and youth and care. Check and Connect is the only tier two evidence-based mentoring program. It's been through the What Works Clearinghouse. We identify students that are at risk based on their ABCs, which we look at as attendance, behavior, and then the C is course performance. So either credit deficient, failing classes, things like that. And then mentors work with students and families, which is kind of that partnership aspect to set goals to help students re-engage with schools with the overall goal of graduation. Check and Connect is designed as a 2-year mentoring program. So the idea is that students, as they re-engage with school, potentially could have drops and changes in their behaviors throughout that 2-year time frame, but they're able to develop relationships, which helps with that goal setting and that family engagement as well. If you do have questions about Check and Connect, please reach out to me. My email is right there at the bottom of that slide. But one more thing about Check and Connect, just to be aware of, is that the Prevention Block Grant is going to be opening up again in 2026. As we get towards the summer, just look for any information around that. But that block grant has been utilized to help fund prevention programs in Utah. Throughout the state, we're currently serving almost 3,000 students in 25 districts, and that is both YIC and prevention. Prevention's around 1,500. The program, as you're looking at identifying kids for prevention, we have programs that are looking at absenteeism. We also have migrant, refugee, and newcomer programs, some gang and substance abuse programs, and then just credit accrual as well. So if you have questions, what you can utilize this for, how it can be utilized, where can you get funding, please reach out to me as you guys are looking to develop this. The state has taken on the contract with Check and Connect, so we do provide all resources and all training, with the caveat that under prevention, each district or school pays for the mentors. And then we in turn have data, we have a dashboard, we can monitor fidelity, things like that as well. Last year, we also released our attendance toolkit, which follows best practices for LEAs that are starting to look at or revising their attendance systems and procedures. This is something that we utilize a lot in our engagement and attendance cohort as far as the structure. So we look at establishing an attendance team, how you can engage your stakeholders, parents, school personnel, community members, looking at data, how you can leverage that to identify students, also developing of MTSS structures specifically for attendance. For those of you guys, I know I've used the acronym, I didn't identify it, but that's multi-tiered systems of support. And then looking at how we can reflect on our practices and make adjustments, and also celebrating what we're winning at the school level, how students are being celebrated, and family members as well. And then updating board rule and legislation, which will probably make some modifications after this legislative cycle as well. And then we do have our statewide attendance campaign. Megan's going to dive a little bit more into this here in a second, but if you're part of the attendance challenge, the deadline to submit your survey and mid-year data was January 9th. If you have not had a chance to submit that, please do it ASAP so that we can start compiling that data. And then check our shared Google Drive folder for many resources, especially as you're planning for next school year. And if you need access to that, reach out to Megan. Her contact is at the bottom of this slide. All right, Megan, I'm going to pass this back over to you.
Okay, just really quickly, if you, which I'm looking at a lot of your names and I don't know all of you, obviously, but I just dropped this link in the chat. If you want to become an attendance ambassador, we would love to have you as part of our attendance campaign. We have a number of statewide attendance ambassadors. This includes students, parents, teachers, administrators, district leaders, and community partners. So literally everyone. We would love to have hundreds of statewide attendance ambassadors. We're still obviously engaging with that and hoping people will join us as an attendance ambassador. If you're wondering what it takes to be an attendance ambassador, literally nothing, just saying that you support kids being at school. There's no extra work. It doesn't require you to do anything besides fill out the survey and say, you can put my name on your list. Here's a picture. And then we just add you to our website and we add you to our slideshow that we present then when we talk to other people about when the question always gets asked, what are we doing in Utah about attendance? And we talk about our statewide attendance campaign, and then we talk about how many awesome ambassadors we have who are adding their voice to say that they want students to be in school. If that's where they've chosen to be, that's where they want them to be. So that again, no extra work to you. We'd love to have all of you join us. I've dropped the link in the chat, just takes you to a little simple Google survey. Just fill that out. And then if you have any questions, let us know. So now we're going to dive into some attendance legislation, or not just attendance legislation, but just legislation in general. So if you aren't familiar with the legislature, sorry, here in Utah, it is a 45-day session. The session, like Garrett was saying, starts next week on Tuesday, January 20th, and then it ends on Friday, March 6th. So the way it works in Utah is our legislature meets for 45 days. Obviously, there are things that happen before that and after that, but they're actually officially in session during that time. We have 75 members of the House of Representatives. Garrett, if you'll go to the next slide. And then we have 29 state senators. If you're not sure who your representative is that represents either where you live or where you work, we will get to that in just a second. So if you go to the next slide, we'll talk just really quickly. You might be wondering, like, well, how do the laws get made in Utah? Some of you probably are from the generation like me where we listen to Schoolhouse Rocks and we learn about how a bill becomes a law through that. Maybe you're still using that. I know I used that not too long ago as a teacher, teaching my own students about the journey of a bill. So obviously, first of all, an idea for a bill is born. This could be a change to either existing law or to brand new legislation, and then the bill is drafted. So the legislator works with a drafting attorney, and they only share that with certain individuals. And that has what has been happening within the last few months. And then after they're drafted it, if the legislator decides like, yep, I want to move forward with this bill, this is something I really want to push for this session, then that bill is numbered. The bill is now public. So at that point now public, all of us can see the bill and see who the sponsor is of that legislation. And we have quite a few bills that are already numbered, even though our session has not started yet. And then after that, then what will happen when next week starts is the first legislative body committee. It'll go to a committee, and that committee will give their feedback, decide if they're going to, you know, they'll support the bill, and then it will go to the body floor. So it goes to the committee, then the body floor, and then it has to go either from the House to the Senate or from the Senate to the House, depending on which legislator starts the bill. So it goes through both of those through a committee and then through the floor. And then if it passes the committee, passes the floor, then goes to the second body and it passes that committee and that floor. Then now it goes, the very last step is then it goes to the governor. And then if the governor signs it, then that bill becomes a law. And then in every bill, it will tell you when that bill is going to take effect. It usually takes effect in the May of the year they were passed, unless they, otherwise put it somewhere else. So that's kind of a journey of a bill. So as you're watching legislation happen over the next 45 days, you'll be able to be like, okay, I know now it has to go through each of these steps to actually become a law. Just so you know, if you'll go to the next slide, last year in the 2025 session, there were 238 education bills introduced. So lots of people wanting to do lots of things with education. Only 136 of those bills were actually passed, who went through, both the Senate and the House. And And so you can actually see those bills, and then they feature so many of them in a public education summary. So last year, the education bill passage rate was only about 57%. So some people might be like, oh no, we saw this bill and we don't want it to happen. Well, there's about a 57-ish, that at least last year, that those bills actually became a law. So the next slide, Garrett, if you'll go there, it just tells you this website. If you go to le.utah.gov, this is where you can find the list of your legislatures. If you're not sure who your legislator is, you can also find all the codes. This is a very informative website. So if you don't have it already bookmarked, one really awesome thing too about this website is you can actually go to specific like education bills and you can track, like you can sign up and sign in for your own email and it'll tell you if there's a change in those bills. So if this is something you feel passionate about or you really want to be informed this legislative session, I would highly recommend going to this website, creating an account, and then finding the bills that interest you, and then you can track them is what it'll say, like track this legislation. Just the next slide, Garrett. There are already two, again, session hasn't started, but there are already two attendance legislation, two bills that have already been numbered, obviously drafted and have been numbered, which means legislators are pushing these bills forward. The first one is in the Senate. It's going to start in the Senate, Senate Bill 58. This is from Senator Fillmore. This is a kind of a long bill. This is kind of a long summary, but this bill establishes a comprehensive school attendance monitoring and accountability requirements. It requires LEAs to implement attendance tracking and intervention programs. There are mandates with performance metrics for attendance notifications. It creates data quality standards for student participation reporting, adds chronic absenteeism interventions as part of that you can now use your school land trust program to also help with attendance interventions. And it also makes some other like technical changes with definitions and other things as far as attendance legislation goes. So it's very interesting. If you want to check it out, you're welcome to read that bill. We also have another bill that's in the House. It's going to start in the House with Representative Stoddard. This is HB 106. And a summary of this bill is just that it establishes a chronic absenteeism data requirements and requires a chronic absenteeism study. So those are the two bills that there are lots of other education bills, but we're talking obviously specifically about attendance. So those are two bills that have already been numbered that will be presented this legislative session. So if you have questions about the legislation or legislative process, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help you with that. So I'll turn the time back over to Garrett and yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. And I love Schoolhouse Rock also. So we are going to talk a little bit about attendance policies. So we get frequent questions around what should be included in your attendance policy. So we kind of wanted to dive into a few of the highlights that should be in each of those. The first thing that you want to make sure you have are the attendance definitions that are used in your policy. We also have 53G 6201, which has our definitions that are utilized statewide. So that should be referenced in your policy. Each policy should also look at general procedures and requirements. And so looking at what are your specific LEA or school, depending on which policy you're doing, attendance expectations, what excusing absences look like, as well as a list of valid excuses. We have our valid excuse list at the state level, with the caveat that LEAs can develop their own list in addition to that. So you can't take any of the state valid excuses off, but you can add some at the LEA level. We recommend having check-in and check-out procedures for families, and attendance notifications as part of that as well. Another good thing for your policy to include are stakeholder responsibilities. So looking at what are the student expectations around attendance? What are your parent or guardian expectations? That can be looking at like how should a parent make an call in for an excuse? What about long-term absences, pre-excused absences? What are the teacher expectations? So when should a teacher be reaching out to families? When should there be a notification? And then also administration and counselor expectations. This could look like when those compulsory ed letters or truancy letters are coming out, why there might be a parent request for an administrative meeting, things along those lines. But the more those are laid out and outlined in your policy, the less questions that families are going to have because it's already there. Another thing should be interventions and support. So identifying your MTSS structure in there would be great. Looking at what you provide tier one, tier two, and tier three so that families know why they might be having an attendance plan or why there might be a 2 by 10 coming up or their child's being recommended for Check and Connect. You can include some sort of a flow chart. So kind of like what happens at each level of absence. After 5 days, this is why we're going to be reaching out with a phone call. After 10 days, this is why you're getting some sort of a letter, things like that, so families understand where they're at on that spectrum. Um, and then also looking at the promotion of regular attendance. So what kind of messaging we have as a school or a district, what kind of incentives we provide. Are they end of term incentives? Are there certain attendance growth incentives, things like that? And then also an appeals process. So if there is some sort of an attendance issue, how does a family go about appealing that decision? What's the process look like? And that needs to be made clear for all those stakeholders that are involved. Where do you need to share your attendance policy? So our board rule R277607 says that your policy needs to be shared, and you can look at your attendance policy being shared on your district or school website. It can be a letter home that goes to parents. Back to school night is a great time. You can have an attendance table that's at like promoting positive attendance, sharing your policy, looking at your upcoming goals. Whenever you have new student registration, it'd be great to share that policy with families that are going to be onboarded. And then it needs to be shared annually. We recommend the beginning of the school year. You could share it as you come back from your holiday breaks, just to remind families. You can share it at those low attended times when you're trying to get people to re-engage, just so that it's staying fresh in their mind as well. Some other ideas as you're sharing your policy at the new student registration or beginning of the school year, you could ask parents and students to sign a pledge that is a commitment to coming to school. And then any attendance notifications that are going out, you can also share that policy just as a hyperlink, especially if it's coming out in an email, text, anything like that, just so that it's always there. Families can click on it quickly and reference it. That makes it pretty easy and convenient for everybody as you're sharing. So what do we as USB offer as far as support around attendance policies? Right now, we're currently creating a model policy that is going through the review and publishing process. So that'll be done by the end of the school year so that you guys can look at that coming into your summer work. We definitely recommend revising policies at the end of each legislative cycle because things constantly change. And we also try to promote what happened and what changed and what you need to be aware of as well. But at least every 5 years would be considered best practice because of that legislative and board rule change. So ideally, that model policy, you guys can hop in. You can make some adjustments and changes, but that'll be usable for all schools, all districts in Utah. And then also, we will meet one-on-one to discuss questions you have about your specific policy. So if you're not sure about something in there, or if you can add something, you can reach out to Megan or myself. Typically, we'll both hop onto a call. And then we're here just to support you on those one-off questions. You're also free to send us your policy so that we can review it, make sure that it matches up with current laws and board rule, and then we'll send it back with feedback so that you can take that to your boards and whoever you need to make that final approval. We do also have a shared Google Drive with policies from other LEAs and schools around Utah. If you have one, after we review it, if you guys are comfortable with us sharing that out as well, it just helps provide some ideas for other people that are drafting their own policies to see what people are utilizing around the state. And if you have questions, being able to look at that Google Drive so that you can see what's being done in other people's policies also. All right. We will have a question period at the end. So if you do have other policy questions, how you can kind of hop into that, feel free to save it for the end here. But I'm going to pass it back over to Megan to talk about attendance data for interventions and incentives.
Awesome. All right. So the last topic we're going to talk about today, and I promise you're going to get to hear from someone other than me and Garrett. But we are going to talk just really quickly. About some examples. So I sent out a survey, and a lot of you, or possibly you were on that survey, maybe you weren't, about how are you utilizing attendance data for your incentives and interventions. So Garrett, if you'll go to the next slide, we have LEAs in schools that are utilizing Panorama, which if you aren't familiar, Panorama was chosen as our early warning system for the state. So we'll talk more about that at some point. But there are people who are already using Panorama and the tools within that program. That helps them identify students who need interventions. We have others that are using Infinite Campus, and there's also an early warning screen that helps identify students based on attendance, behavior, curriculum, stability, and their grad score. You can then sort students within that list to see who is struggling the most. We also have schools that have at-risk teams who meet to discuss students and possible underlying issues. Interventions are then discussed at this meeting, and then implementation starts and barriers are identified for families. We just were talking like when each of us were in schools that we were all kind of doing different things. We thought it would be cool to kind of see what are some other things that are happening. So if you go to the next slide, Garrett, we also have schools that where the principal is holding attendance meetings with parents and students, and then individualized interventions are implemented depending on those specific meetings that the principal holds. We have schools that are running reports to see who has chronic tardiness and absences, and then they schedule meetings with those who have obviously excessive absences and tardies. We have some who are running a report to see who has a 95% or better attendance, and then those students are entered into a drawing to earn rewards from the school. So both the intervention side and then also how can you utilize attendance to help with incentives. We have people who are obviously using automated text messages to parents, email from teachers, and then calls from the secretary or admin, and then admin holds those meetings. And then just the last slide, Garrett, just that we have some people who utilize their attendance secretary who then filters those, and then they have this attendance secretary kind of pulls their report and then says, okay, it might be better for a counselor to meet with this person or for an administrator to meet with this family. And then we have other people who obviously have attendance teams who look through attendance data every week and then kind of decide what to do with each of those students and those families. So pretty much what we want, the main message is that there's not a wrong way to use attendance data, but that you should be utilizing your data, using those reports. I know I used to pull reports of students who were both failing and having attendance issues. I had too many students in my schools where I worked that had just attendance issues. And so I was always trying to focus on kids who were failing and missing. But that was just how we approached it within our own school. But we're excited today. We have Bree Conley here from Salt Lake School District, and she is going to tell us about all of the awesome things that they are doing in Salt Lake District, not only just with, mostly focused around data and how they're utilizing that in their different schools, and then the different interventions and incentives that they are offering. So, Bree, we'll turn the time over to you, and I'll kind of let you introduce yourself too, if you wouldn't mind giving a little backstory maybe of where you guys have been and kind of where your goals are to get there.
Yeah. Can you all hear me, first of all?
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
I'm Bree Conley, and I am the Director of Equity and Access here in Salt Lake City School District, and I oversee attendance. This year we have three board priorities and one of those is attendance and decreasing our chronic absenteeism from 28% to 10% by 2029, which is a lofty goal. But we are excited about it, and we are starting to implement quite a few things in order to try to achieve that goal. And part of that includes using data in order to make informed decisions. So our early warning system platform that we utilize here is Analytics and Insights from PowerSchool, and we use it for multiple things, including weekly data for schools to understand where their students are at and what supports they need to provide, um, to see what tiers of support students are needing, and then to inform families about what's happening at their school, to set goals for themselves, and then to celebrate with the school. We also use it for challenges between schools, for PBIS incentives, district level celebrations. High schools have a particular focus this year, and then to use disaggregated data dives and be able to support student groups as needed. You go to the next slide, please. Great. So here are some screenshots that I took of what Analytics and Insights does for us and how we utilize it. So the first box is just giving us a breakdown of absences by days. A lot of principals in our district like to look at absences, student absences by 3 days. So on the fourth day, they can make contact with the families and then also potentially do a home visit and then try to have that child back on the fifth day. We also have it by 5 days, by 30 days, and year-to-date attendance. What I like about that is that it shows us what our attendance was at the previous year at the same time. So it helps us to say we're really going to beat that goal this month or this year or this week, whatever it is. The screen or the box under that one, it has the 5 days of absences. So this is a particular school, and it shows that on Mondays, they have the most absences of the week. So their PBIS committee uses that information to create some incentives for students to ensure that they are trying to come to school. So if they meet 90% attendance on a Monday, then on a Friday they could do a pajama party, or they can all dress down if it's a school that uses uniforms. The top right-hand corner shows us students with their level of chronic absences. So the green bar is students that have no absence issues, and that's a percent of students. And then the other ones show us trending chronic, nearly chronic, chronically absent, and severely chronic. And schools can use that information to pull the list and see who the students are and then be able to provide interventions at the level that the students need it. So it's a quick way of just saying these are the kids and this is what we're going to do for them when they meet in their attendance teams. And then the bottom one shows how grades are doing. So if I was in a school, I would be using this to do celebrations for the grade levels that have the highest percent of students with no absence issues, and also to have conversations with those grades that are showing that their students are pretty chronically absent and what are we going to do to change that up. We can go to the next slide. Here's just some pictures. These are things that I collect every time I go and do a school visit, so that when we come back to our administrators meetings every month, I can show these are the things that are happening across our schools. So one of the schools has we're heating up our attendance thermometer. The other one is using the Demon Hunters for every grade level. And once a week, they update their attendance, and it's displayed right across from the cafeteria. So the students are interacting with the data as well. And we also have it in the middle school where the principal goes out of their way and creates these graphs that students can interact with as well and say, oh yeah, this is where we're at. This is where we were the month before, and this is where we need to be. Right under that, Franklin Eagles, where they strive to arrive. That's a bulletin board that's right outside of their office, and families can see what their goal is for attendance and where they are every day. So their school office updates their percentage every day as they get that information. There's a Whittier celebration. That's one of the elementaries. At their faculty meeting, they showcased the grade levels and the absences of students, and they were celebrating the sixth grade at that point because they were the ones with the least amount of absence issues. In another school, they did that big bulletin where it says Every Day Matters, and every single child has their name signed on there, which I think is pretty cool. So every time they pass by, they see their names and they're committed to coming to school. And then another one just has their grades broken down by grade level and then their attendance percentages every week. We can go to the next slide. We also use data for school challenges. So two of our middle schools, Hillside and Clayton, they're geographically close to each other. And so they chose to do a November attendance challenge with Never Tardy Timmy the Turkey. And Hillside lost the challenge, so they had to wear the t-shirts from Clayton. And then in the month of December, we had Northwest Middle and Glendale against each other doing an attendance battle. And Northwest beat Glendale. So next week, Glendale gets a pie in the face. The administrators get a pie in the face from Northwest. So just some healthy competition between schools helps kids to stay going. Next slide. We use it for PBIS incentives as well. So at the top, there's a school, K-8 school, and they fill in the letter for the word. And once they do, as a whole class, when everyone is there, then they go ahead and display the word outside in the hallway. And you can see second grade has the most words filled out. So they celebrated second grade in that instance. And then they're trying to motivate third grade, for example, to fill in their word when no students are absent. On the bottom, there's a principal, and she's doing a lunch with all the students who met a certain percentage goal for attendance. And that was pretty fun to see. And then the last one, right, there's the golden shoe expectation that classes are able to win during PBIS assemblies. Next slide. So this is one of the recognitions that we do at the district level. When administrators meet once a month at the beginning of the month, I gather all the data from elementary, middle, and high schools. And for most improved attendance, we give out this traveling goat trophy. It's cheesy, but the schools are really digging it, and the principals are like, I'm going to get that next month. So we always strive for that. We celebrate most improved attendance, best attendance, lowest chronic absenteeism, and reduction in chronic absenteeism monthly. And we're using that data from analytics and insights to inform what school's going to get it. And you can go to the next one. And so this is the trophy that we give out for chronic absenteeism reduction. One cool thing is our superintendent normally opens up the meetings, and after she speaks, then it's the attendance celebrations. So she helps me pass these out. So we're doing it together, and then the schools take the trophies for the month, and they usually have their students create some sort of video or graphic or social media post that they display for everybody to see. You can go to the next slide. The high schools, they're trying to focus on ensuring that everyone is taking attendance every single class period. So we're focusing on that tier one aspect. West High, for example, they had about 65% of their teachers taking attendance. The principal decided to send out a message and continue to do this weekly. And now they are constantly between 93 and 97% attendance taking every single day. And that pink box, they send out a newsletter to all the staff, and they tell the staff this is where we were at with attendance taking, obviously taking into account that there's going to be substitutes in the building. So sometimes those classes won't have their attendance entered by the time that they need to. But if attendance has not been taken within the first 10 minutes, now it's the expectation that the front office calls the teacher and says you need to submit your attendance, and then they move on for the rest of the day, which is great. Our data is only as good as what is entered, so we want to make sure that we have that consistency in data being reported. Next slide. And then when I meet with the principals during that monthly administrators meeting, we usually do some PDs, and I know this is small, but I can share the link with you all and you can see it. But really, we just look at our attendance through analytics and insights, and then we break everything down. What are we doing tier one wise? How many of our students are present? How many of them are absent? And then we look at our tier two students. What are we doing for them? And then we set some goals for every single tier. Is it to strengthen attendance taking? Is it to strengthen teachers calling home or sending messages home? What is it that we're trying to do? And always keeping it with the lens of what can we control at the school level? Because if we start thinking about what families are not doing, then we don't get anywhere. But there are a ton of things that we can do ourselves to support our students coming to school. And then the second chart or graphic organizer is for a PD that we did for our Native American population, which is our second most chronically absent student group here in Salt Lake. And so we did a PD with our Title VI coordinator. And after he presented on what it is that his job entails and how he supports our Native American population, in addition to all the things that we do for all of our students in Salt Lake, I had the principals go in and look at their data, how many Native American students they have in their schools, how many of those students are chronically absent, what are some of the barriers to coming to school, what are some of the things that we can implement to support their students. And then at the bottom, they had a goal that they needed to meet. So I always try to keep them focused on what their goal is and then what are some of the supports that they need to make those things happen. And then we check in once a month or as needed to help them attain those goals. And that is what I have.
Thanks, Bree, for sharing the stuff you guys are doing. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Bree, or you're welcome to come off of mute or type them into the chat. But some of the questions, we thought might be good for you to talk about. We were going to do a breakout. I'm not sure that we have enough time at this point. But just what attendance data do you have available at your school? How are you utilizing your data to make data-informed decisions about attendance? What trends have you observed? And then how are you using data to support individual students and families? You can kind of see all the ways that Salt Lake is looking at their data, the ways that they're utilizing their data to make data-informed decisions at the school level and at the district level. Kathy, would you come off and ask your question?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Hey, Bree, I've got a quick question for you. How is Salt Lake City School District handling learner validated attendance for your online learners that don't necessarily fill a chair in a classroom? Are those students also a part of your data, or do you have separate metrics for them? Can you just address that if that's okay?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that's one that we're still trying to figure out because if there's not a way for us to see if they're in attendance for that class that day, that makes it harder for us. But we're trying to sort that one out still, starting small here.
Yes, I think everybody, I guess if we were probably to ask that question, is there anybody on this call that has like got that figured out? Because I think that's a great question, Kathy, that yeah, I'm not sure anybody's quite figured that out, but does anybody have any ideas of how they're doing that? If you would come off of mute, that would be awesome. We'd love to hear if somebody has some ideas of learner validated. There was also a question in the chat about what has worked the best for parent education. Are you guys doing anything with your parents in Salt Lake, Bree, if you could answer that?
Yeah, so I started this position in July. And now that I'm doing a lot of it, I'm thinking about how do we maximize all the opportunities that we meet with families in order to also tell them about attendance. One of the things that we do is we communicate with our families through Parent Square. That's our method of communication for everything. And through there, we send attendance messages, whether it's from the district, from the school, or even from the teacher themselves. Another thing that I'm thinking about for next school year is when we do our Title I presentations at back to school night, we can also do 3 or 4 slides about attendance and the importance of attendance, in addition to some handouts that principals can pass to their families. And then, like Garrett mentioned, just when we have those big holiday breaks, that we also remind families through Parent Square again, hey, this is what's going on. This is how we can go strong through the rest of the year. And then we also use our social media quite a bit to remind families about attendance and the importance of it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know we also, an idea I just thought of that I did when I was at the school level is just when we revised our attendance policy. So that if you're somebody that's in your process right now of revising attendance policy, that following year, the first year that we were implementing, we actually held like attendance, like night, like a specific parent night It was actually during back to school night, but we held it in our auditorium and had parents come in and students that were there. And invited them to come, and we actually taught them at that point. Obviously, a lot of your parents and students who have chronic absenteeism might not be at parent back to school night, but for those other families and those other students, then there wasn't, like at one of my schools there was just like this rumor like we had no more attendance policy because back in the day we used to do like NCs, no credit, and you had to make up and go to attendance school and all those things. And so when those things kind of changed, the kids were like, there's no more attendance policy. Like, we don't have to go to class. And parents were kind of like, we don't have an attendance policy at the school. And we're like, okay, we need to like do some serious education here. So I would definitely recommend if you are revising your policy, not just sending it out, but also giving parents, it gave parents and students a chance to ask questions of like, what does that look like? What does that actually mean? If you're saying we have to have a valid excuse, like, what if we don't have a valid excuse? Okay, let's talk about that. Like just being able to ask those questions. And then, like you said, Bree, like utilizing every opportunity when you're meeting with parents, when you're sending out any letters or emails, attaching your policy or attaching some education. Not every parent's going to read it, but at least the information's there if they do decide to read it. And then we'll all just keep trying to keep people informed. That's part of our big goal with the statewide attendance campaign is increasing awareness, not only to schools, obviously, but to our parents and to students that like attendance every day does count. That is our logo for the statewide attendance campaign. Um, just a couple of other things that we've heard from people, just with like what are some best practices. Some people are, they're really on board with like, you know what, we are finding that we are getting better results by focusing on positive and kids that are coming to school versus kids that are not coming to school. Not saying that that works everywhere. I've heard the exact opposite from other people that are like, this year we decided to focus on the positive and now our chronic absenteeism is going up. I'm like, yeah, it's not like there's not a one stop fix all for attendance, unfortunately, or else we would all just be doing that. But other people have talked about just working on focusing on a positive school culture, and getting a sense of belonging and really focusing on that. Their school culture has also really helped with attendance. Just getting an attendance team and getting a team focus where you have a team of people, not just like an attendance secretary who's trying to do all of it, but that there's a team of teachers and counselors and administrators and all those people working together to talk about attendance, that's made a huge difference. And then just obviously partnering with parents. That can be like a challenge, but also so rewarding when you can be able to do that. Are there any other questions that anybody had that they want to ask that you came with and you're like, oh, I wish they would have talked about this, or it doesn't have to be about any of the things we've already talked about, just questions in general about attendance.
I have a question.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, turning my.
No.
I am curious what it looks like. We've had some parents when we've, reached out about attendance and kind of met with them a few times, they've pulled their child and said, we're just going to homeschool and withdrawn them. And I'm curious what there is to do. I mean, my understanding is there's nothing we can do and no accountability around the homeschooling, but I just wanted to see if there was anything you guys had on that.
Yeah, if a parent chooses to withdraw their student, as long as they've signed that homeschool affidavit, then really the accountability goes back to them, which is hard as like an educator. You want to make sure the kid's getting the best that they can. You can always like they'll stay on your roll, more or less. So you can always like send a quick reach out, like invite people back, that type of thing. But as long as they've signed that homeschool affidavit, then they're really not your student anymore.
So follow-up question there. That
Okay.
affidavit, I'm new to this is like my first year doing attendance. I don't know what that is or where that is, and I'm just curious if you can point me in the right direction because I don't know that some have signed that. So I'm not sure what the next step would be if they haven't signed that.
Yeah, I'd say we can probably add that into like our follow-up email, where we share the slides out as well, if that helps. And then also I'm just going to click this. So you have our contact. If you want to just send a quick email to Megan or myself, then we can kind of follow up with that and send you a direct one also.
Yeah, usually different districts have different ones that might be specific to your LEA too. So depending on that too, but there are one, or I don't actually know. I shouldn't say that because I'm like, is it different at every district? Because I feel like I haven't seen other ones outside of my own district where I worked. So I shouldn't say that because I don't actually know. Like, but we'll get you a sample one if they haven't signed the official. We'll look it up and get you an official one that actually, because there is an official, like, and it has to be um what's the like it has to be notarized too. So if they're not using the notary, then
There's
that
been
Yeah,
a change
it's
in
not.
legislation with that actually. So
Oh, sorry, Kathy. Yeah.
yeah, in your follow-up, check the legislation from the last session. The requirement for an official affidavit changed.
yes,
So
we'll find that and we'll send it out to you.
can I ask Valerie a quick question?
Yes, please.
Valerie, when you're having these parents pull their kids for homeschool, are they just generally pulling them because they don't like the curriculum, they don't, a bunch of stuff, or are you seeing an uptick because they don't want to do the requirements? Are you seeing a lot of middle schoolers doing this?
So I'm in elementary and
Okay.
I'm at a Title I school and there's a
Hmm.
lot of needs here. And I've just noticed when parents are concerned about, like, we obviously try a lot of positives before it gets to this point, but when parents are afraid that there's going to be accountability with
A
whatever that looks
consequence.
like, that's when
Okay.
I'm noticing they're pulling them.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. And I do know that for like middle schoolers, I'm seeing an uptick of parents who want to do high school classes to replace middle school requirements, which is not a thing you can do. And so I'm hearing there's an uptick in parents just saying, well, I'm just going to say we're homeschooling and then therefore we don't have to do that. So thank you for letting me know that it's an
Oh,
elementary
yeah.
issue. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just dropped that in the chat, Valerie. There's like the model, it says like model one, so I think you can adapt that. But that's the USB one that talks about how this form, it tells you like how this has to like be in effect and all of that. So
I do.
And
that,
Oh,
it
sorry.
is an official thing as you're like pulling a kid out because there are a lot
yeah,
of situations that are similar to yours where a family doesn't like something or is upset and they just say we're pulling them out to homeschool, and so that's why there is like an official document that needs to be completed so that like it's accountable. The state knows that this student is no longer receiving services from that school. They're doing it their own, whatever that looks like.
I do have one other question. It's not really a question, it's just more of a concern that I'm noticing. And again, like I can reach out to legislative representatives, but with compulsory letters, um, when students live in an apartment complex, those certified letters get bounced back and aren't given certified mail. And so I'm just wondering if there's a way the law can be changed where it's something like a red receipt when it's being sent, because we use Parent Square and it shows if the message has been read. Um, and I think that would be more helpful because that's like something that's preventing us from getting support from, like, honestly, when we have students who are severely chronically absent, I've noticed when DCFS gets involved, that's when they're absentee, like they start coming to school. And so that's kind of something we've been doing to help, but they won't go out unless a compulsory letter has been received. And if they're not being received because people live in apartment complexes or are refusing to sign them, that's like been a something that's been preventing us from getting that support.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, legislatively, that would have to be updated. And I think that that's a realistic argument with the way that people communicate nowadays. Like certified mail probably is not the most logical all the time if you have some sort of communication platform. So yeah, I think that's something that as potentially we have the opportunity to talk with people, or if you talk with legislators as well, that would be a worthwhile thing to dive down.
any other questions? I know we're over time, but this is our exit survey. If you have just a second, it's really short. You could fill that out, give us some feedback. as we prepare for our other webinars to finish up this school year. But thanks for being here today. We'll stay on for a little bit if you have other individual questions you wanted to ask, but you don't want to come off of mute with lots of other people around. We're happy to also meet with you individually too if you have questions.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
I'm new to well, I just joined the as an ambassador. But
Awesome. Thank you.
I've been participating in Everyday Count. And I kind of was starting to go back through the webinars that I've missed. And I noticed that you mentioned a shared drive with
Yeah.
like samples. Like I remember hearing about surveys, like stakeholder surveys that we could send out, and I would love like a sample of a stakeholder survey and what that could look like. I'm interested in getting one for our school and the attendance policy, like the shared drive with like examples. Where do I find that?
Yes, I can share that with you if you want to just
Okay,
either drop your email in the chat or send me
sure.
an email, whatever's easiest for you.
Okay,
I don't know if I was just opening to see if we do have, I'm trying to think if we have like a stakeholder survey in here, but if we don't have what you're looking for, we can definitely find it. Like there are
okay,
other districts and people that have sent similar things out, so we're happy
Yeah,
to
and
find.
Attendance Works as well has
Yeah,
stuff. So
they
yeah,
have.
definitely.
Perfect. Yeah,
okay,
I will get you added to this right now so then you
okay.
can,
That'll be great. Thank you.
of course. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Let us know if we can answer any other questions for you.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question for you guys. Have
Yeah.
I know, Garrett, you and I have met and talked about DCFS referrals and just the process that's in place for those referrals. And you shared that document for here's what's required before a referral is done. And yes, I think the question around the certified mail is great because I think even having that read receipt through like an SIS would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Here's my question. I have a new staff member who came from a neighboring LEA, and this could just be I work in an impacted district. Um, so then there might be more DCFS reporting happening for a variety of reasons. But if I look at my data related to the number of requests for a case and the number of cases opened, that percentage is very low. But my new staff member who's coming from a neighboring LEA had indicated we didn't have that same experience. Again, there's lots of reasons for that, so it's not me calling into question that team. But I'm curious at a state level, is there an opportunity to be looking at um, for you guys statewide data to figure out how frequently is it being reported that there is educational neglect and how frequently is a case being opened, and is there a disparity in those data points, and then to be able to ask that question why, because I don't have the full picture. I just have my small window and I don't want to make assumptions that I don't have all the information. But I'm curious if that could be a conversation at your level
Yes.
because we are not getting educational neglect cases opened. Like I'm
One,
saying, I've got counselors who have been in career status for 25 years and have
no,
had
it's
two
never.
in their
Yeah.
career. So I
Are
think
you
for
kind of
me,
asking Nicole like the frequency of reporting versus the cases opening, and then also kind of comparing that like regionally? So like Ogden
mhm,
versus Salt Lake County or Weaver versus Salt
yep,
Lake County, things like that
yep,
too. Cool.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. I'm just kind of
Yeah,
making
we
notes
can.
as
Yeah,
we
we
like
can
reach out to people.
definitely, yeah, look into that. We're also creating, this will be in our shared drive shortly, but we've kind of been diving into that compulsory ed law and like kind of breaking it down for people. And part of that is that it does say that the local school board or school district shall report violations like to the county or district attorney. So we actually reached out to our attorneys, our people here and ask them like, well, because we're not hearing, like, I've never heard of a school actually reporting compulsory ed to a district attorney. I know I never did that as a practitioner either. So I don't know, maybe you've done that, Nicole, and we don't know about it, but that was also new that I was like, do they know? Like, so we kind of have been looking into that before we're like telling people like, but that is what it says in the code says that very specifically. That if like the violation is happening with compulsory ed and nothing, parents aren't engaging, we aren't getting any response, that those should be reported there. So we're kind of going down that road too. We just started like over the break. I spent all these hours like really diving into that law because I'm like, that's an interesting thought, but like, what does that even look like? Like, because we've had similar people saying the same thing with like DCFS, like not that they know other people are getting it and they aren't, but just with our own experiences in different districts, different counties, just what the engagement was. So we definitely could look at, we have contacts obviously through DCFS to say, like, have you guys looked at this? And is there common practice, like, who decides, and what they tell us is like, unless there's a secondary finding, most likely a case won't be opened. So that's kind of what we've told people, but obviously it sounds like you're hearing differently.
Well, yes, because I also have a staff member who used to work for that
DC.
organization, and I'm saying, here's this. In fact, I've had a staff member who was an employee who said, yeah, that's not what I know of. And then we got called in our district saying, you guys are not filing these cases.
Mm,
And so I'm meeting with the DCFS team saying, well, here's some of the barriers that we're experiencing and why we're doing what we are doing. Because yes, I know it's a shall, and that's tricky because I don't think we build relationships with families by calling DCFS. Like
yeah,
I think there's a need for it, but if you're following statute, you could be at a compulsory ed violation 3 days into first quarter, right? Like 1/10 of a quarter is not a lot of days absent if you're looking at all of
yeah.
like anyways.
5 days, five
Yeah.
truancies. Yeah.
Yeah. So but when I met with our DCFS team here in Ogden, they had said that they were not aware that that was the process. So this is
Mm,
where I'm kind of going back into where you guys meet at a statewide
yeah.
level. Then what does that dissemination of information look like statewide? If
Yeah.
that's a possibility, that would be lovely. And then if you could share out, even if that's just with me. But I'm curious about that because for me there's some
Discrepancies. Yeah.
discrepancies in what is being shared. And again, like I don't have all the information, so more information would be helpful.
Yeah, we can definitely
Yeah,
look
that's super
into that,
helpful.
talk to our contacts too at DCFS and because yeah, like I said, we kind of were diving into this and we created like a model compulsory ed letter as well that we're going to be sharing out. That then, so if you're, because as I was asking everybody to send me their their compulsory ed laws or letters that they're using, I'm like, okay, we need to create one that then people could just like, if you wanted to, you could just copy and paste it, add your district logo to it and feel confident that it was exactly saying what was supposed to be said that's in the statute currently. But again, there is statute bills that are actually that could change some of those things. So I don't know if people are going to be like, we're not talking about this until the end of this session and we see if these things change. But I think that's a great idea to have